Welcome to another episode of Tabletalk, R&D for Greater RP. Today I have a very special guest, Professor Dungeon Master from Dungeon Craft. We're going to talk about game philosophy with a specific focus on Tracy Hickman's excellent book, XDM. Today I'm very excited to announce my guest is Professor Dungeon Master from his Dungeon Craft YouTube channel. He's fantastic. How are you today?
Very well, sir. Thanks for having me on, Jay.
Oh, of course. So I'm a big fan of the XDM book, and from your videos, you're also a big fan. And a lot of the time when I say that in a place where other GMs are, whether it's Facebook or a store, I get a lot of fingers in the air, like crosses with and everything. Why do you think that is?
I think that what XDM is, I think that what it does is it attempts to deconstruct the role-playing games, and role-playing games is an art, and I don't think people are ready for that. I think that they're, for players, whatever version of Dungeons & Dragons, like, let's start with just Dungeons & Dragons, whatever version of D&D you play, whatever edition, you think that's the real game, right? So people my age, they think first edition was the real edition, and second edition for people in the year 2000, it's the third edition, and now it's fifth edition, and they're very beholden to the rules. And I get a lot of comments on my channel about why do you want to change the game? Like when I suggest things like change, I don't know, weapon damage or attacks or initiative. How's initiative done? And there's a lot of resistance to that. And my response is, I'm not changing the game. This is the game that I played. This is the game from the 70s and 80s. You're changing the game. But that's not really true. But people are really stuck in their system. And I think that XDM, in addition to that, if you look at the artwork, it's very cartoony. It's a very lighthearted book. It reads like a comedy book. People don't think that the system that they're given there could be legitimate, is somehow legitimate. But what it really does is break down role-playing games into their essential elements. So I think people are really into systems, and you can see that when you go to a convention. People are always buying new systems, creating new systems, selling new systems. But I don't think the system is the most important part of the role-playing game. I think it's the story.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was just about to ask. I have a friend of mine, and it's really, really refreshing to have a friend who's passionate about the things I'm passionate about, who disagrees with me on almost everything, but we can still argue like adults, which is really nice. No one's going to insult each other's moms or anything like that, right? It's nice to have an adult disagreement. And I love XDM. And he goes, oh, here are all the rules. And I go, you don't need them. Because he sees the any tabletop experience as a game. And to me, like with winners and losers. And to me, it's a story. And I was curious if you would explain how you feel about that particular part of it.
It's both. It's both in equal measure. It's a story insofar as there are characters, and most dungeon masters are big readers, big fans of fantasy. They love stories, and that's why you become a dungeon master. Mostly, you have a world, you have stories that you want to tell. And on the other end of it, however, it's a game. It's dependent on the dice. You really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there are dungeon masters who, to my taste, they're too much on the story side, and too many games. Like they eliminate dice, then it's not a game anymore. But at the same time, that idea of winning and losing and rules, that's part of role-playing game tradition too. That goes all the way back to the creation of the game, because D&D was born out of miniature war games, and miniature war games have winners and losers. So that was the framework that Gygax and Arneson were working out of when they invented the game. You need both those elements. I prefer if it's a little more story-driven, but it depends on my group. If I'm playing with younger children, if I'm playing with teenagers, they're more into the game, killing everything, taking the treasure. And if I play with adults who are really good at role-playing, then they're into the role-playing and creating this communal story, which for me is much more interesting. But it depends on your group of players, and I can run the game either way.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of I've had GMs give me a hard time for this, but maybe it's the way I phrase it. But bowing to the table. If everybody at the table wants to run a science fiction Star Wars game with energy swords and pew pew guns, then I guess that's what we're doing. Because there's only one of me and six of them. Fair's fair, I suppose. Um, I wanted to take a second. This isn't really a question. I just wanted to celebrate your campaign videos because my wife watches those and she is riveted by the story. And she wanted me to tell you that she enjoys them and she does not play. And I thought that was a pretty impressive compliment.
That's nice. That's nice to hear because I'm struggling because they don't get as many views as the other videos, but they take like 4 times as long to make.
How long does it take you to make one of your smaller, this is what I think about this concept videos?
That could take, any video that I take takes more than a day. Because
Really?
I have to shoot it, and then you have to do the cutaways, because if you're just looking at the face all the time, it's kind of boring. You got to do the cutaways. And then the editing and the thumbnailing. I'll start on a Saturday, and it'll be up in place by Monday. But the campaign updates, it's an incredible amount because I am telling the story in much of it. I want to shoot. Like in the last one, I think it was the last one where you see the hallways of the witch's tower and stuff like that, and that kind of stuff takes a long time to set up, and I really dread doing them because they take so long. It's nice to have all the comments, so many people comment, and I love those. And it's interesting. I do have friends who are not into role-playing games, and they like those, and they don't like the things about hit points
and initiative and right.
And so I'm going to try. I'm working on the next one now for July, and I'm trying to sort of broaden it out and make it. It's about the difference between prepping and planning, and the campaign update at the same time. So trying to figure out the balance of those things.
Have you considered rebranding them? Because I avoided them for quite a while. Because as a general rule, if it's a campaign, if it's a story that I'm not an active participant in, then they almost never grab me. Only yours do. Chris Perkins, who's famous, right? Matt Mercer, who's famous. Adam Coble, who's famous. None of their Twitch streams or anything grab me. Acquisitions Incorporated doesn't do anything for me. And I don't mean to say that Matt and Chris aren't great. They are. But their stories, I'm not a part of them. It's like watching somebody else and 3 of their friends read an audiobook. But your campaigns aren't necessarily just the story. There's also, here's how I draw my map. Here's the flow chart, which I had a friend lose his mind on me the other day because I told him that I play like you do. I run a flow chart with a little bit of stuff, but not tons of stuff. But I grew up calling that closed matrix storytelling, like it calls it in the XDM book. And he just could not wrap his mind around that.
It's funny you mention that because that is actually what's going to be in the next campaign update. I'm going to do a little bit of the matrix, closed matrix, and how to distill the 10 pages of whatever you're reading into a 1-page sheet of what you really need.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I might call them prep sessions, but you can Facebook me, and anyone else can Facebook me on the Dungeon Craft site and make a suggestion. I will rebrand them, and I will call them something else because so many people like them.
Oh, and your man Skinner is just awesome.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
That was really cool. So, I guess I want to, as much as I don't really want to agree because it makes me sad, you're probably right that the world isn't ready yet to see D&D and other tabletop games as more entertainment than strictly a game. I was talking with Curtis Hickman on Twitter the other day, and I asked him, do you have the module for XDM, the Quest for the Tavern?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Okay, remember in that book it mentions the Player's Codex?
No.
It's in there somewhere. In the beginning, they mention the Player's Codex, which is the upcoming next book. That book is from 2010. There is no Player's Codex.
Oh, yeah. The XDM Player's version. Yeah,
Right. There is no book. And I'm really sad about that. So I reached out to Curtis and asked him, I don't mean to be pushy or anything, but is there any possibility that book is coming out? And Curtis said it's on my desk somewhere, but my dad and I kind of agreed that the world wasn't ready yet. And as much as I'd love to disagree with him and with you, you're probably right, and that makes me sad.
I'd love to see it. I'd buy it.
I would too. I'd throw money at that right away. I asked him if there was a pre-order button I could push.
Yeah.
So, what is your? Can you summarize your philosophy at the table into a couple of sentences?
Um, I think that it comes down to XDM on page 138. It is my philosophy. It all comes down to rolling against 20 numbers. That's all a role-playing game is. It's just a method for simulating physics, right? In a medieval world or a science fiction world or a cowboy world. And you're going to have a system. But the system ultimately comes down to you roll a 20-sided die and roll high. And even if you're not, let's say you're playing Call of Cthulhu, right? Let's say Call of Cthulhu, Pendragon, Elric, RuneQuest, they're all the same system. And it's a percentile system. And I played Call of Cthulhu last week, and I had a 57% hand-to-hand combat. But rounded off to the nearest 5, that's the same thing as rolling a 10 on a 20-sided die. That's all that is.
Yep.
So every single role-playing game can be converted to that, and you really don't need a system.
Yeah,
And
5. If it's middle ground difficulty, 10, 11. If it's really easy, but you still need to roll, 5, 6. If it's medium difficulty, like if it's if it's more difficult than medium difficulty, but it's not extremely hard, 15 or something.
Yeah, that's correct. And so my philosophy is keep the rules simple, keep the game moving, and as fast as possible. It should be like as much like a movie as possible. So when I ran a game last Sunday for my regular group. We had a great time. It was done in 2 hours. And we went through several rooms of the Caverns of Carnage. And everyone had a great time and left maybe 2.5 hours because my friends don't have a lot of time. So that's the philosophy. Just keep the whole thing moving. Keep it as immersive as possible. And that means not looking up things in rule books. And it means not flipping through the adventure. And being in the moment and not losing people's attention. That's my philosophy.
Excellent. Thank you. I meant to ask. You have an upcoming video on experience, and I'm very much looking forward to that. With your characters who start at 0 level and work their way up, this is a new campaign you're currently running, right?
Yeah, I'm actually when I run the Caverns of Carnage, I'm running 4 characters.
Okay. I could have sworn one of your videos mentions a campaign you had run for something like 20 years.
Yeah, that's the other timeline. I've run it. It might be longer than that. It might be almost 30 years.
Wow.
With that's many of the same players, but with different characters. Those are the long-range characters and that I can only think of an adventure because they're powerful. It's sort of like the Avengers. It takes something big to get them together, and we'll play that once or twice a year.
Okay, I was gonna ask if what level are those characters in your XP system with your magic handouts and all that?
6th.
6th, and they're incredibly powerful. See, I really like that. I remember a time where there wasn't a 20th level epic handbook. You were amazing at level 9. You were basically a god at level 9. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
In terms of like their hit points and stuff, they still only have like 15 hit points. What makes them powerful is that they've moved into positions in the world of influence. So they're not your average adventurer on the street.
So like the fighter can command an army and the cleric has a bunch of zealots, like that?
Like that, yeah.
Cool. I don't think I've ever run something that got to the scale where the main party could command hundreds of troops at a time if necessary. I don't think I've ever done that. I feel like I would remember.
It's not hundreds, but they might. Well, one guy's got 100. He's the captain of the watch for the city.
Oh.
So that precludes you from sort of just, going on an adventure into a cave to find, a magic ring or something,
Yeah, it does kind of keep you in place, doesn't it?
Yeah, so, yeah, that's the long running campaign. And then I have other, same players, different characters, in different groups doing different things.
In your campaign that you're running right now, where the characters were 0 level up until past the Goblin Caves, which was awesome, by the way. How many characters, 0 level characters, do they come with? Was it like a funnel where they each got more than one?
Yes, so it was 4 or 5 players running 3 characters each.
Okay, cool. My next campaign with my friends, we're currently doing a Witcher tabletop game. There aren't really heroes per se. The world is morally gray, and it's not D&D in the sense of how it feels, but mechanically, yeah, it's all dice. But it's when we run the next game, they're hoping for something more traditional. Every mage has a crooked tower. There's a fighters guild. There's probably a thieves guild, but they don't have a sign, right? Discretion and all that. And I was thinking about running the way you do it, and I was the only snag I came up against was the 0 level characters, because I imagine that with those stakes you presented that at least a couple people died.
Yep. Yeah. My thought on running that character funnel, it really works best if you have 3d6, not 4d6.
3d6 for stats?
Yeah, 3d6 for stats, because then what happens is anything, if you rolled up, let's say 3 to 6 characters, and you say, okay, well, you take even the 3 best. Now those are the ones you're adventuring with. Well, they're gonna choose the one with the worst stats to open the first few doors and to go in the first few rooms. And they'll be left with the one that's the best. So I think people are way more precious about saving characters when it's a big deal if you have 1 or 2 plus ones.
Agreed. I ran a Dungeon Crawl Classics funnel not that long ago, and it was strange to watch this almost Darwinian veil wash over the players, and all of a sudden become very, very selective with who opened what door and when.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of it. That's why I love that.
So back to XDM for a second. Is there, as much as I'm a big fan of XDM, it's really your show. I'm just hosting it. Do you think XDM is good enough the way it is to run right out of the box?
Yes, I do. I think you can run. When I first got the game, I simplified everything. There's the basic XDM, and then there's advanced XDM. We used advanced XDM, and which is for people that don't have it, it's got 3 stats. There's essentially physical, mental, and your magic and everything else, magic levels. Then you got your health, right, your hit points, and your character level, and that's it. And I ran games like that for years. And I ran them at conventions, and it worked perfectly fine. Well, when you understand what Hickman was getting at, it's like seeing the Matrix. It's like when Neo sees the Matrix for the first time, you realize it's just a bunch of code.
Yep.
That's what XDM is for me. It's just a bunch. Role-playing games are just code.
I'm a big fan. I have a couple of books on the shelf that I treasure more than my other tabletop books on the shelf. And XDM is probably the one I would rush to save in a burning building before I went to save the others. I'm a really big fan. I'm happy to find somebody else, because a lot of the time, like I said earlier, I say XDM and people go, "What's that?" and I hand them the book or explain it to them, and they put up crosses with their hands and hiss at me.
Yeah, they really define, role players. They really define their experience by what the rules say, and that's again, it's that wargaming tradition. Yeah, everything has to have structure and everything has to have rules, but the most important rule is to have fun. And That's what that game encapsulates. And the other thing is, it's true. Like I'm just reading two lines. No matter how realistic you try to make your game, it still comes down to a single die roll that can only respond with 20 numbers. That means, as the resolution scale in games, the response can only be in 5% increments, and that's essentially the way every role-playing game works out. One thing that's I'm going to say in an upcoming video is about hit points, and I don't want to give it away because it's about eliminating. Can you eliminate hit points from a game? But the idea that when you have a non-player character that's part of the party, and you're rolling for these orcs, and you're rolling for the non-player character, that's like you're not really playing a game. You're playing a game with yourself if you're the dungeon master, while your players watch. I think that's just weird.
Yeah.
And it comes from that idea that you must roll every single thing out and calculate everything exactly, and that's very strange, not playable, and that's where games drag if you get into that.
Probably the most radical decision I've ever employed at the table as far as hit points just happened recently. Again, I've done it before in the past. My players went up against this big, scary, super threat guy made out of lightning. I made him up. He doesn't have like a stat block in the book or anything. I made him up. And the player, right? And he doesn't have hit points at all. They believed he did, but he doesn't. He died when they were exhausted and tired, and it felt epic to everyone at the table. I was bored 5 minutes, 10 minutes before that, but they weren't ready to walk away and call it an epic fight yet. Like, until one of them had his chest almost caved in from a giant ice spike. It wasn't epic enough for them, and I wanted to rise to their expectations. It's a big, scary super fight. I've spent 3 months making this guy into the boogeyman. So I'm not going to let that narrative hook roll on dice and static numbers on a sheet of paper. So he died when the moment suggested that he die now. And afterwards, I caught a world of crap from a bunch of my GM friends.
Well, your players don't know how the sausage is made, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, I told one of them after that, just one, because he's really great at not metagaming, and he's a fellow GM, and he was like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, to be fair, I haven't done that with every creature you guys have fought or anything, but just that one, yeah." And I needed to know how you felt about long, drawn-out, stupid fights. If you all loved it and I hated it, you'd probably need a new GM.
You're gonna love this episode, and I think it airs next week.
Oh, I can't wait! I'm super excited.
I think what is this? Is this Saturday?
Today is Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna air this upcoming Thursday. You're gonna love it.
I'm super excited.
More about it.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from your video. I would be speaking of your videos and your channel. I'm hoping it's okay that I link to Dungeon Craft when I put this show up in a few days.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, excellent.
I need people watching this thing.
I love what you do. I don't think you have enough subscribers. Like, more people should watch you, and less people should watch Matt Mercer. And I'm gonna catch so much crap for saying that.
But that's nice. I love Matt Mercer.
Me too.
I admire, he's great.
He's really great. I have mixed feelings about what Matt has done for the industry, but as a GM, he's really cool. And on his more personal Twitter posts and stuff, he as a person, he also seems pretty cool. So, that's pretty awesome. But this has been really, really great, and we passed 20 minutes. I could talk to you all day, but I'm sure you have stuff to do.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, though.
Oh, absolutely. And, I would love to do this again sometime when I have some other game that I want to take apart. Dungeon Crawl Classics would actually be great.
Yeah, we could do that, because I have that game.
Excellent. I don't have it yet, which is the reason I chose XDM and not Dungeon Crawl Classics. I eventually need to buy the Index Card RPG, too. I've been known to buy a book just because you recommended it.
Oh, thank you. That's flattering, and I appreciate taking the time out to talk to me, inviting me on your show.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Have a great day. And that was Professor Dungeon Master with Dungeon Craft. What do you guys think? Is tabletop gaming a game? Is tabletop gaming a story? Can we call it tabletopping? Is that an acceptable verb? Does it solve the problem? What do you think at your table? Later days.